Hi, this is Paul. I want to talk a little bit about celebrity, sense-making, institutions, and authority. Of course, I made just brief mention of the Will Smith, Chris Rock slap, and this thing still is generating conversation, which is interesting in and of itself. Some call it the smack heard around the world. And obviously, the smack alone wouldn't have been anything without the little speech that Will Smith gave when he got back to his chair. Now, Hollywood, as I've mentioned many times, is these are the stars by which people try to navigate their lives. And this has been true in American culture for a long time. I was thinking about doing another video from Carl Trueman's book on the rise and victory of basically it's about authenticity, and authenticity is sort of a grounding of authority in itself. Okay, when we look at something, we say that's authentic. In a sense, we sort of say this is authoritative, and the movies have had such a powerful impact on the culture. And so when you look at something like the Academy Awards, even though myself and most of us, I think, don't watch it for a whole bunch of reasons, but that is not disconnected from a similar loss of authority and power that has happened in the church. In some ways, I had a couple of conversations today. A couple of Randall's conversations today. Probably neither of them will make the come to light, just because one we didn't record because the one individual didn't want to record it, and the other individual was a little skeptical as to whether or not she'll want to share it. But we'll see. It was a great conversation. But I made the point that 800 years ago, if you were living in a town in France, your main sense-making was done by the church, by your family, by the village, and by nature. Well, the problem with having a video in mind and then trying to switch is that the old video comes back.
His vision is not for the return to some mythical rural childhood of humanity, such as might be discerned in some of Wordsworth's poems. Quite the opposite. Its purpose is to inspire individuals with a desire for liberty and to encourage them to move toward the future, to usher in a revolutionary age when oppressors will be no more and freedom will be truly realized. Of course, Shelley is acutely aware that the violent path to freedom, as exemplified in the French Revolution, proved to be a road to nowhere, and culminated not in the liberation of humanity, but in bloodshed and then the rise of a new tyrant, Napoleon Bonaparte, to replace the old. Poetry is for him the alternative to such violence. Its impact will be inherently ennobling. It will enable people to find the harmony in nature behind the chaos of the present, and it will raise political consciousness in such a way that the ends of social revolution will be achieved peaceably and more perfectly than any process of direct violent activism could achieve. The eschatological utopia depicted in Queen Mab is brought about gradually, by evil slowly exhausting itself through its own contradictions, and thereby leaving human beings free to live according to reason, which is itself rooted in an instinctive and unfettered passion that delights in love to others.
Now this, of course, is Shelley's poetry, and before this, he goes into this long section about how exposure to art and nature is ennobling, and this follows on Rousseau about it's all of this cultural stuff that you have to get out, and once you clear it off, you find that people are naturally good. It's amazing how much culture those little violent 2-year-olds can possess. But now this goes somewhere, and we're going to swing back to Hollywood because, of course, the Church of Hollywood is built on this.
The poet for Shelley is therefore a person of singular, revolutionary political importance. Indeed, to use the phrase with which Shelley closes A Defence of Poetry, poets are the unacknowledged legislators of the world, because they are the ones who transform people, and therefore the world through their artistic creations.
Now it's almost always better if the writers can stay behind the scenes so that the fruit looks authentic. Now, as mentioned many times, if you work in a church, you see how the sausage is made. You know all of the warts and people who sometimes come in and everyone's so pretty and everyone's so nice and everything's going lovely and the music is good and there's the art, and maybe you're in a church that has pageantry and liturgy and cathedrals and architecture, and wow. And then of course you find underneath things aren't quite so good. But well, that must certainly be a problem with the project, right?
They bring visions of possible futures into the present. They give hope. They inspire. They create desires for something better. And though they themselves do not necessarily understand the full significance and power of the words that they have been inspired to write, they yet move their audience toward a world of universal love and freedom. Man, as Hazlitt says, is a poetical animal. Shelley would agree.
Now, poetry is not something, like many things in this world, it's not something you just sort of fall into. It's something that you have to cultivate, and it's something that requires years of training and a high degree of mastery of language. What if you could take all of this and make it in a much more user-friendly form where it's just a deluge of pictures and music and all of that to inspire us? But of course, the unacknowledged legislatures who are writing the words stay behind the scene, and we will need the pretty people that are in this, that are the beings of light on the glowing screens that make us believe.
Freedom from religion, freedom for love. It should be clear by now that poets such as Wordsworth and Shelley represent cultural tendencies that stand in positive relation to some of the pathologies that are of great significance today. We see in their work and their understanding of the poet's task the artistic expression of the new way of conceptualizing human selfhood that we noted in Rousseau, a selfhood rooted in a belief that human authenticity is to be found by freeing oneself from or transcending the alien demands of civilization, by returning to the impulses of nature, and by rooting what it means to be truly human in feeling prior to any consideration of reason.
Now, of course, nature as constructed here is in many ways a bit different from the terror of the woods that most of our generations were subject to, because nature is red in tooth and claw. And so, of course, what happens in Romanticism, entire chapter was on Romanticism. What happens in Romanticism is that, well, now that the grizzly is banished from Yosemite, which it's named after, and the wolf is banished from the places that the wolf used to be, now suddenly we might see a deer, but death by deer is not quite as salient as death by wolf or death by grizzly. There's some black bears still in Yosemite to give you a little bit of excitement, but black bears and grizzlies are very different creatures. Now nature is that which comes unbidden. Nature is that which is not impeded by things like reason. Nature just happens authentically without preparation. Nature is the ability, like a certain female Jedi recently portrayed, who just does everything instantly and is the best at everything just because that's who she is. It's absolutely natural for her to best everyone with a lightsaber, isn't it? There's nature in a Mary Sue sort of way.
Both men share an emphasis on the corrupting nature of society that has alienated human beings from their own authentic identity, and thus an emphasis on an inward psychological turn in order to find one's true self. Then there is the related priority placed on sympathy and empathy, emotional responses to suffering and to identifying with others, as the foundations of ethical thinking. This, in turn, finds its corollary in an emphasis on aesthetics rather than rational argument as being the most powerful means of exerting influence and changing people for the better.
Now, when reading this, I've got this and Ian McGilchrist sort of going back and forth because, well, yeah, they're right. This stuff does change people better than rational arguments. And I've got plenty of my own skepticism about the limits of rationality, at least as such construed. But the point is, this gets at our wiring deeply. This is all about story and narrative and power, and the way to tell a story using all the means and technology possible in order for the assumption of the values of the story to feel absolutely natural.
And we might also note the consequent importance of the poet or the artist as the means of transforming society. Credit where credit is due. Percy B. Shelley made the case for cultural figures as the key to political revolution, over a century before Antonio Gramsci and then the New Left. Yet two further elements are particularly prominent in Shelley that are harbingers of much of the politicized cultural discourse of our own day. His attack on institutional religion and his understanding that sexual liberation is central to political liberation. And for Shelley, as for many in our own day, these two concerns are closely linked because one of the most obvious ways in which religion has historically exerted its power is in the policing of sexual behavior and sexual relationships.
And with many respects, nothing feels more natural to us than sexual desire. It comes unbidden. It is not asked for. As we grow up, it sort of moves within us, and suddenly these girls that were icky and had cooties, but you're still a little fascinated by them, suddenly are the objects of intense attention. And the girls that before were just sort of going through the world now discover that they are the objects of intense attention. And what could be more natural in that sense? And if natural, what could be more authentic?
Shelley's disdain for religion, or more specifically Christianity and Judaism, is evident from his earliest writings. Indeed, from the moment when, as an undergraduate, he and his friend Thomas Jefferson Hogg authored the pamphlet The Necessity of Atheism and were expelled from Oxford for their pains. Then, in the early poem Queen Mab, the fairy guide launches a powerful attack on the Jews as they howl hideous praises to their demon god, which is in effect an attack on Christianity, expressed in the then more socially acceptable idiom of anti-Jewish polemic.
It's very interesting when I heard this morning, how often in Christendom Europe, especially before the Second World War, because the Second World War sort of rips the cover off of it, anti-Semitism was a cover for some people, like the Nazis, for what they really wanted to say about the Christians. And this happens before Hitler's imprisonment. That's one of the things that Hitler learns in the imprisonment is, wow, Christianity's very strong, better watch what I say about it. Let's just keep attacking the Jew. And we can attack Christianity, or at least its roots, if we attack the Jew. And it's very interesting the way that here with Shelley, the same thing. Well, you can get away with attacking the Jews. At that point, the church was way too strong. And, as Hitler discovered in some of his first revolutionary attempts, don't attack the church. Be careful with her. But the Jew, easy prey.
For Shelley, religion is a means of manipulation by which the powerful keep others subjugated, and which is perpetuated primarily by the self-interest of those who have used it to gain the power they enjoy. God himself is the very prototype of human tyranny, a willful, arbitrary, unaccountable despot. But most important for our purposes is that there is a clear connection in Shelley's mind between religion, political oppression, and restrictions on sexual activity, i.e., the maintenance of chastity as an ideal and the promotion of monogamy as a binding and normative institution.
And what you can see in this is, again, this is long before the stuff we're dealing with now, but you can almost read the writing that Christianity is hurting people. Well, how's it hurting people? It's denying them the liberation, the natural, the self-authenticating experience of satisfying desire. Go back to the Rousseau video.
In one of the visions of the future in Queen Mab, the fairy sees a world in which men and women return to a state of nature. The happy denizens of this poetic Eden behave in a manner that he characterizes as follows. Unchecked by dull and selfish chastity, that virtue of the cheaply virtuous, who pride themselves in senselessness and frost. The contempt for traditional sexual mores is obvious, and it is here that we see an expression of the connection between authenticity and sexual freedom that will become so important in the late 20th century. As we noted in the introduction, expressive individualism may be the necessary precondition for the sexual revolution and modern identity politics, but it cannot in itself explain why it has taken the sexual form that it has. And here we see that connection between individual authenticity and sexual liberation is not of recent vintage, but has a clear precedent in Shelley some 200 years ago. Yet far from being unique in this, Shelley is somewhat representative of radical thought at the start of the 19th century. Traditional moral thought and practice in the area of sex had undergone dramatic transformation in the previous decades in a number of ways. In his History of Sex, Faramers de Boywala summarizes this shift by pointing to three significant and closely related developments in the 1700s. 1. The increasing importance ascribed to conscience, basically understood as natural instinct, as a reliable guide to moral behavior. 2. A growing public distaste for judicial punishment of consenting heterosexual transgressors, such as adulterers, of standard moral codes. And 3. The rising view that the moral laws based on external authorities such as the Bible might in fact be social constructs and actually stand problematically over against the natural laws governing human nature. The first and third of these tendencies are obviously important for our narrative, as they bring together two elements in a way that remains influential today. When healthy sexual activity is considered a matter to be judged by instinct, then inevitably those institutions that disagree with such will be seen as problematic and as hindering human authenticity and freedom. And when the primary culprit historically is religion, this means that religion will be the target of the sexual reformers. In the West, this specifically meant Christianity. This latter point is very clear from the way the critique of traditional sexual mores manifested itself. In its most radical forms, this cultural shift on sex involved a vigorous attack on the institution of marriage, and thus on that which constructed and maintained it, that is, Christianity and the Church. Shelley's father-in-law, William Godwin, is a fine example of such a critic. In Book 8 of his Inquiry Concerning Political Justice, Godwin dismisses marriage as an evil that checks the independent progress of the mind, that is inconsistent with the natural propensities of human beings, and that dooms people to a lifetime of unnecessary misery. We might note the implicit contrast he makes between the conventions of society as currently constituted and the propensities of the natural state. His claim is that humanity's natural instincts militated against monogamy.
Now notice, again, the word natural. And, Carl threw up his hands about the Ukrainian thing and seems to have left us. But Bionic Mosquito is still here. These are some of the tensions in terms of using this word natural. Because if the assumption of the definition of the word, as I think is the dominant definition of it today, means that which comes unbidden to me. You can look again at C.S. Lewis's 5 sentences from his book Miracles. Are those your natural teeth or a set? The dog in his natural state is covered with fleas. I love to get away from tilled lands and metalled roads to be alone with nature. Do be natural. Why are you so affected? It may have been wrong to kiss her, but it was very natural. And so when people who are brought up in the world of Rousseau and Shelley ask what natural law is, well, natural law is quite self-evident. It's that which arises unbidden and is not interfered with by all sorts of things. The natural kiss is the kiss which will be given if moral and prudential considerations do not intervene. In all of these examples, nature means what happens of itself or of its own accord, that which you do not need to labor for. And of course, for poetry, well, one might still have to continue to labor to have your sensibilities refined sufficiently to benefit from the felt natural impact of poetry. But Hollywood movies, well, Hollywood movies, they're so powerful. The screen is bright. The people are beautiful. The music swells. The words are perfect. The timing, the editing. You don't need to have to grow people up into it. You can take the Jesus movie and put it on, and you can take the Jesus movie and a film projector and a generator and a sheet, and you can go back to people who have no reading abilities at all. And the pictures and the sound and the words, they just carry the day. That's authentic authority. And so when we look at these glamorous people, now, it's a little shocking to see John Travolta with his G.I. Joe lifelike beard and no hair, and you realize he's a little shorter than he seemed to be, and I'm not quite sure, is that Irma Thurman who was the one who gave the speech? I mean, because their images in film and video don't change, I can't see John Travolta as Vinnie Barbarino or singing his way through Grease or in Saturday Night Fever in that white suit doing his thing. And now he's this sad, weird Scientology guy who lost his pretty wife, who died young and beautiful too. And we've got the farmer's insurance guy sitting there in the front, and we've got Kevin Costner and his new career as a Western magnate, and we've got, of course, all of these other people, and of course Will Smith, Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, who's I Am Legend, and Muhammad Ali, and I mean, just following the path of Hollywood royalty, we call them. Well, who are royalty? They're the natural rights of kings. Will Smith was, in fact, sort of Zeus in what was the name of that movie? It was a very interesting movie. It'll bubble up recently. And then, of course, in that moment, Will Smith goes up and slaps Chris Rock. That doesn't, not a slap like we would expect from Zeus, but all because it seems that, well, is this a moral thing that he's defending the honor of his wife? Well, I thought shame and honor culture was a bad thing. I thought maybe an independent, strong woman would go up and slap Chris Rock herself. It would have been, it would have been very interesting to see Jada Pinkett Smith go up on stage and smack Chris Rock. But no, she's got feminine energy and feminine power, and the man will do it for her. And then one of the comments in the video today, because I got back and I checked the comment, and it pointed me to a new video from The Critical Drinker, which I thought was absolutely timely and outstanding.
It might be hard to believe now, but there was a time when movie stars were practically venerated as fucking gods amongst men, when people genuinely looked up to and respected them as the living embodiments of the American dream. Glamorous, refined and larger than life, but kind of remote and untouchable, like they existed in some other world that was separate from our own. Something inspirational for the common man to aspire to, but never quite to reach.
Now, in some ways, part of what I continue to wrestle with in terms of assessing modernity and figuring out the way forward, and especially doing this with respect to someone in my profession who who presents the Bible to regular people in the world and in the church. And it is, again, I've been fascinated by Jonathan Pageau's treatment of universal history. And in many ways, movies and movie telling of history has sort of become the universal history. Most of us know that when the movies present history to us, whether it's Gandhi or Muhammad Ali or some venerated hero of the past, that they're going to run fast and loose with the facts. Well, that's okay in movie translation, because after all, it's the narrative, it's the natural morality that flows from the story. That's the absolute truth. Gandhi in the movies by Ben Kingsley, or Muhammad Ali from through Will Smith. Certainly, the movies are telling us exactly what happened. Now, maybe they'll change a little few details, and it'll be based on a true story. But here we know the truth we get through the movies is the authentic truth. It's the natural truth. It comes unbidden. There it is, with these idealized archetypal figures that have the powerful good looks of a Richard Gere that doesn't age. I can watch this movie when I'm 20, when I'm 40, when I'm 50, when I'm 60, and Richard Gere and whoever he's starring with will be just as powerful and beautiful as the day I encountered them. Certainly they are upper register, above the age of decay, unlike us.
Now they've become kind of a sad, dated, unfunny joke without a punchline, fuel for 1,000 memes on the internet, mocked and belittled for their clumsy attempts to preach and pander and curry favour with the very people they look down on with such contempt, their flaws and shortcomings and insecurities increasingly exposed for the world to see. Whether it's fucking clowns like Seth Rogen pretending to be articulate, well-informed political activists and losing his mind anytime someone points out how ludicrous and out of touch he is, or Madonna sitting in her bath of milk and rose petals trying to explain how she's no different from a minimum wage factory worker who has to make the daily choice between heating their home or having food to eat, or run.
If you had told me that was Madonna, I wouldn't have recognized her. Gotta get all the wrinkles out of the face. And do you know what milk costs a gallon? You know what it would cost to take a bath in it?
Perlman ranting and raving into his phone about some political bill that he clearly has no knowledge or understanding of. Or Gal Gadot leading a bunch of idiots in an off-key rendition of Imagine at a time when most people were questioning whether they'd even have a home to live in next month. Or J.K. Rowling somehow managing to alienate basically everyone by going to war with the very people she spent years pandering to. Or Will Smith losing his mind because he can't take a fucking joke. I could probably go on for days about this, reeling off examples of celebrities embarrassing themselves in front of millions of people, and that's...
even most, if you watch The Critical Drinker in these kinds of videos, most of the images that he's just shooting at our minds are not terribly connected with the little talk that he's given. And that's why I've said before that sometimes the better way to listen to his videos is to listen to his videos and not look at the images, because, I mean, the images are just programming us. Of course, except when every now and then he in fact drops an image in, which is making the point of exactly what he's saying, like this one.
Not even counting the really dark and sinister stuff lurking out there. But the point is, the whole cult of celebrity that used to be such a big, powerful part of our culture really feels like it's dying on its arse these days. And to be honest, it was kind of inevitable that this was going to happen sooner or later. The world we live in is changing, and so is the way we see the rich and famous. But
first the church, and now the temples of the cinema are falling. How will we be able to make sense of the world if the movies don't tell us what is real, what is true, and overcome us with the power of their self-authenticating images, sound, music, and stories.
If I had to describe the instrument of their downfall in 2 words, they would have to be social media. See, back in the 90s and even the 2000s, celebrities were a lot less accessible than they are today, and generally the only time you heard from them was in carefully scripted interviews with magazines, friendly journalists, and talk show appearances where they were contractually protected from difficult or uncomfortable questions.
Now, you can parallel this, of course, with before Watergate news treatment of reporters didn't say anything about JFK's sexual antics in the White House. During the Second World War, we did not want to see FDR in his wheelchair. Seeing a strong president feels so much more authentic than having to deal with I mentioned before, the gray narratives that Sally mentioned in the Thief in the Night video not too long ago. The gray narratives of, well, what about FDR in that wheelchair? Yeah, Eleanor Roosevelt, she's such a paragon of what's coming towards us. But FDR, of course, has his mistress.
I mean, don't get me wrong, there was still plenty of potential for fuck-ups, like Sean Connery giving his decidedly old-school opinions on violence against women.
I remember you said you don't do it with a clenched fist, it's better to do it with an open hand. Yeah, remember that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
I didn't love that.
I haven't changed my opinion.
You haven't?
No.
Or Marlon
I had no idea about that. Can you imagine that today? No. And quite frankly, I'm not complaining. Men shouldn't hit women, period. I'm a creature of my time, I suppose.
Brando refusing his Oscar to make a statement about how Native Americans are treated in the industry. Just as a little side note, Roger Moore walked home with a fucking Oscar that night because no one else would take it.
Listen to the rest is history about James Bond for a really wonderful Roger Moore story.
Or Oliver Reed showing up to talk shows pissed out of his fucking mind.
Why do you drink?
Because of the finest people that I've ever met in my life are in pubs.
Never change, Ollie, never change. But these things were generally outliers, rather than part of the broader culture in Hollywood, and for the most part they were usually criticised as crass or inappropriate, generally...
Now, another part of the point I wanted to make, got some really wonderful emails about Doug Wilson from a variety, but mostly women, even though women are a minority of the channel. One of the points that I wanted to make is that part of my skepticism about how can I talk them? How can I represent them? About frozen in time conservatism is that it can never be had. The Amish in 2022 are different from the Amish in 1975, are different from the Amish in 1930. Now there's a group of people that are really serious about not changing. Most of the attempts at frozen in time conservatism that I see are blinded to the change that is going on around them and the way that those changes are changing them. An example that I think I referenced was at a meeting in which a conservative church in our denomination voted to leave. And was quite amazed at how vocal the women were at the congregational meeting, given the fact that I know from a member of this church that when she was growing up in that church in the 1960s, women weren't allowed to vote or speak at congregational meetings. Somehow, that change was embraced, but other changes are seen as forbidden. Now, again, it's absolutely important to figure out what to change and what not to change, and often we get it wrong. But please don't fly the flag that we never change. because, like I said, the Amish in 22 are different from the Amish in 1975, even if on some factual basis they haven't seemed to change at all. But all of the points in which they're not changing are all actually related to other points in the culture. So if the other points do change, it changes the relation between them. Combinatorial explosiveness does not happen because of your frozen in time conservatism that vows we will not change. So, and you see this in Hollywood especially, because just go ahead and the other day I get HBO Max with my my cell phone service, and HBO Max has a huge movie catalog. So every now and then I want to go back and watch a movie from the 60s or 70s that I didn't see in the 60s or 70s because I was a kid and I shouldn't have seen them anyway. So I go back and watch them, and I'm just amazed at how the storytelling has changed, how the world has changed. And of course, the 60s and 70s are a period that the 60s a little bit more vaguely remember. I was a boy. The 70s remember quite well. And, well, authenticity, the self-authenticating stream of movies and images and beauty and, well, why suddenly are all these, do all these Hollywood stars knock down from their beings of light pedestals and have feet of clay, just like the silly preacher at the local church that says the most boneheaded things?
Speaking, most celebrities sober enough to know what year it was were able to stick to the script, answering puffball questions about their careers, promoting whatever films they were in, and mostly steering clear of anything particularly political or controversial. And on the rare occasions when they did get involved in shit like that, you knew they meant business because it could have serious repercussions for their careers. Nowadays it's practically the opposite. You're more likely to get criticised for not being political. Anyway, the point...
Right there. And the video after this, we're going to talk about that. You're most likely to get criticized for not being political. Well, something has shifted. In a sense, we are, again, I make this point and some of you don't like it. We are leaving modernity. The video I was going to play was Julian recommended a video where Sohrab Ahmari, is that his name, and Ross Douthat and David French had some sort of a debate. I'll put the link below if I can remember. It was a good video. I mean, as I get to know you all, when it's like Jordan Peterson says about hunting food. When you give me a good video recommendation, and I follow up and it's good, your status goes up. And Julian, it was a good recommendation. Julian's pointed me to a lot of good things over the years, but it made the point that, oh, wow. So now at this late stage, you've got, it's interesting, David French and Jordan Peterson continuing to promote classical liberalism, and others who are sort of both pre and postmodern are saying, hey, wait a minute, cultural values. Oh, it's a vivid discussion.
There was a kind of protective wall between them and the public, so that you never really knew the inner workings of their minds. Thank fuck. You had no clue what they got up to on a daily basis, or the mundane stuff that went on behind closed doors. You didn't know what their opinions were on current political and social events, and you generally didn't see them go off scripts. But then an innocuous little app like Twitter came along, and suddenly they had the ability to interact directly with their fans from the comfort of their own homes. They could put out unscripted, unrehearsed, unfiltered opinions, and enjoy that sweet dopamine hit as thousands of likes and retweets came pouring in.
But now, in all fairness to the Hollywood people, to these stars, we demanded it of them. Just like we demanded it of the preachers in the 60s and the 70s. Be authentic. Be transparent. Show us your true self. This is the cult of authenticity. Yes, we fell in love with you because of the role you were playing on screen, but now we want the real you. We want the backstage pass. We want the lifestyles of the rich and famous. We want to dig down deep and know the secret, sacred self of the glowing people on TV that we worship. So, yeah, we asked for it.
Holy shit, they thought to themselves as they sipped their soy lattes. I can just sit here on my phone and bask in the glow of my own fame, while my legions of fans shower my every word with praise
Knights and mooks.
and adoration. No more boring press junkets, scripted interviews, and tedious questions for me. Now I can talk about whatever the fuck I want. And like a moth to a flame, the allure of instant gratification, constant attention, and on-demand ego-stroking was just too strong for most of them to resist. And before you knew it, these people were given their opinions on fucking everything from social issues to foreign policy to the economy in a never-ending quest to hog the public's attention and bag themselves more hollow praise.
Yes, that. But eventually also, that's part of the job. And you go on Survivor or The Bachelor because you want to increase your clout. And so, one person went on one season of The Bachelorette and had notes about how to get more screen time. And you might be there for Clayton's heart. Not really. You're there because you want to raise your stats on Instagram, and if you get up high enough, well, you'll get endorsements and all sorts of things. And it's quite amazing if you watch some of the early seasons of Survivor, how many of those people went on to have careers as celebrities, as stars by which we little people navigate by.
They were sharing pictures of their homes, their meals, their fucking dogs. They were posing without stylists and makeup in an effort to look relatable. Lovely stuff indeed. The only problem is that, well, most of these people are complete fucking idiots.
And to go back to the previous thing, and this goes back to the golden age of Hollywood, one thing very few people could do is keep a marriage together. And for all of the craziness around the marriage of Will Smith and Jada Pinkett Smith. Well, she put his last name on the end of hers, I have not followed the ups and downs of the infidelities or the open marriage or any of that, because I just don't follow that kind of stuff too closely or at all, really. But what eventually sparked the slap, I believe, was the man wants to keep his marriage. I've seen plenty of men do stupid things to keep a marriage. I've seen plenty of women do stupid things to keep a marriage. So it's ironic that here's a marriage trying to endure the insanity of what every preacher and TV evangelist has had to live by, except you're doing it in a moral blender.
Hollow, narcissistic, poorly educated, privileged, disconnected, impulsive, weak-minded, ignorant, and completely unqualified to give their opinions on most of the things they speak so loudly about. They've made their careers out of saying words written by other people. They've spent years surrounded by well-paid yes men that never challenge their opinions or call them out on their bullshit. So because of that, most of them have never had to be particularly smart or well-informed. People just kind of go along with what they say, and it's created the false impression that what they say must in fact be correct. They've been safely protected within the Hollywood echo chamber, so that when they decide to share their opinions with the rest of the world, it never really crosses their minds that they might be completely fucking stupid. I mean, don't get me wrong, people say stupid shit on the internet every minute of every day. The difference though is that the average person doesn't have a public persona to protect.
Not only a public persona to protect, again, they're gods. They're gods. They're the stars by which we navigate.
Average person doesn't have millions of people who pay attention to what they say, and a news media hungry for scandal keeping tabs on their every move. Truly, familiarity breeds contempt, and the more we see of these people, the less we fucking like them. The more we've pulled back the curtain on the world of celebrity, the more we've come to realise that there isn't anything particularly smart, interesting, or special behind it. The mystique.
And now another institution by which we know good, bad, right, and wrong is sullied and tarnished, and we're not sure.
has vanished, and with it, the misplaced belief in the power of fame. The age of the internet has also given birth to a new breed of celebrities who don't need to be part of the Hollywood machine, or have an army of publicists, stylists, and advisors to reach their audience. All they really need is a webcam and an internet connection because, funnily enough, people respond better to unpolished passion than slick, soulless corporate pandering. Just ask G4 TV. I mean, shit, man, if some drunken asshole from Scotland can find a bit of success online, then basically anyone can do it. And I guess that's kind of my point here. The fact that almost anyone can find a degree of fame and success now has kind of diluted the talent pool and made traditional celebrities a bit less special. And
Isn't equality wonderful?
I guess the natural result of that is that they start to feel threatened, and their clumsy attempts to appeal to that same desire for authenticity only exposes how fake and shallow they
Authenticity, the self, it's the self-validating, verifying authority that comes from within.
really are. Now, it would be unfair of me to say that every celebrity's like this, because clearly there's still good people out there that have managed to stay humble, grounded, and grateful for what they have, and
Look at those values. Oh, Christianity is down there. It's really hard to get out. Humble, grateful. There they are.
resist the darker impulses of ego and attention-seeking. There are artists who do what they do because they genuinely care about their craft and have no real interest in the public attention that comes with it. Some of them have even been able to use their fame and wealth to support good causes or raise awareness about important issues, in which case, good on them. But I think most of the time it's pretty easy to tell the difference between an actor who quietly donates his salary to a charitable cause without expecting anything in return, and a fame-hungry loudmouth spouting hollow political talking points on social media because they think that's what people want to hear. People have got an eye.
No, it's even deeper than that. It's even deeper than that. They're demanded to, because that's what is incumbent upon being a god, at least a god after Christianity. Zeus gets away with what he wants to because he's got power. With Christianity, well, now it's wedded with morality. The noumenal and the moral are fused.
For fakery now, and they don't fucking like it. The end result of all these different factors is that we're kind of transitioning into a post-celebrity world where being famous just isn't that special or unique anymore, where normal everyday people can have their ideas go viral overnight with a single well-written tweet, and where being a big deal in Hollywood doesn't make you a big deal to the average person anymore. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always going to be a place for actors, entertainers, and performers of all kinds, and there's nothing wrong with being fans of their work, but I guess my point here is that their work is what should matter, not all the stupid shit that's been tacked onto it.
But now there's the question of, well, where exactly is the work, and what exactly is the work, and how does that work relate to the world? They are, in a sense, creating universal history. But it's the universal history that has Alexander the Great coming to Jerusalem. Did Alexander the Great go to Jerusalem? Does it matter? What is the universal history for? And how does it work? And how do the registers actually combine? See, the truth is that, as he said, now we have celebrities all over the place, including even me. He's a little celebrity. He's got a little channel, not a big channel. You know, my channel gets bigger. I guess I get a bigger celebrity, and I can't do randos talks anymore. Let's drop into this conversation about truth and the press, because before there were movies, there were the newspapers.
You apologized for getting it wrong. Mm-hmm. Where's the apology from the mainstream media, quote unquote, for all the shit that they've gotten wrong over the last decade?
Now, this is interesting because we're going to get back to the Second Iraq War, which is very interesting how the ghost of WMDs has not been exercised from us. And this question of apology, because, quite famously, Trump didn't apologize, never apologize. And, there's a certain degree of wisdom to that, because what you begin to notice is that people can run you crazy with, you apologize there, now you admit it. And gotcha. But Matt Taibbi apologized.
Yeah. Well, non-existent. And if you go back even further to the WMD episode, not only did nobody apologize for getting that wrong, everybody got promoted. All the people who were the most wrong in that episode, they're all the editors of magazines now, some pretty influential ones. If you know what I'm
And so now we see not only the celebrities of movies, but the celebrities of newspapers and columnists and YouTubers and influencers and podcasters and so, yeah, the WMD episode, they got promoted. Well, why?
Talking about. And I don't think it's. I think the media, when they don't apologize for making mistakes, they just make a tactical error. Like audiences, trust is the most important thing in media. If you don't have
trust is the most important. Why we no longer trust the movies when the glowing creatures on stage and on the screen are using their own words. What was it that Shelley says the poets are? The unacknowledged legislators of the world. Hollywood, the unacknowledged legislature of our world.
Have it, you're dead. You will lose audience share if people don't believe that you're being straight with them. If they don't believe that you have self-awareness.
It doesn't matter how much in love. Well, it's not that it doesn't matter. J.K. Rowling, that someone sent me a little clip of some young woman who's a YouTuber. So I love J.K. Rowling. No, I didn't say that. I hate J.K. Rowling. And well, why? Well. Everything's a moral battlefield now.
They won't listen to you anymore, and we've seen you will lose audience share if people don't believe that you're being straight with them. If they don't believe that you have self-awareness, they won't listen to you anymore. And we've seen the national news media in this country has had tremendous problems keeping its audience.
Now it's interesting. Self-awareness, is that really what we mean? No, it's not self-awareness. It's the constant attempt to make sure that my public image aligns with what the current morality is right now. Now, don't forget B.J. Campbell's. That morality is changing all the time.
Particularly with Trump out of the picture. And I think when you get stuff wrong, you got to cop to it, or else the people will stop believing what you have to say is true.
Now, there's always two senses of wrong. Wrong is, well, the factuality. Oh gosh, what's the factuality of it? That's wrong. But then there's also the morality of it, the alignment with the current moral narrative. That's wrong. So you see that we have these two competing senses of wrong that we're dealing with.
And we just don't do that. Worse than that, we have a new habit of making silent edits, right? So if there's a mistake, rather than announcing it in a big correction, you might just change it in the next version of the online, article, take out certain parts, not put a notation at the bottom of the page. Like, that stuff's also kind of Orwellian when you think about it. Making changes and not telling people that there used to be another news story here.
What happened to Hunter Biden's laptop? Do I remember something about that? No, wait, more images, more stories. WMDs? No, wait. Toppling Saddam Hussein? No, wait. Ukraine? No, wait. And now this, as Neil Postman said.
That said something different. That's pretty creepy. And we're starting to do that more and more often.
You know, a tiny bit of pushback on that.
Okay, he's going to push back, and it's a fine pushback, but I want to get beyond it because I'm running out of time, and there's some more that I want to get to.
Well, okay. No, I understand what John's saying, and I think there's even some validity to that. But no, I'm the son of a news reporter. I grew up in newsrooms around reporters, like not around politicians, not around people, ideologues, right? Like my father was not in the narrative business. The people that I grew up around.
So we've got these two wrongs. One is like the correspondence view of right and wrong, correct and incorrect, factual or an error. And again, I'm not saying this isn't true, because remember, the upper and lower registers, that's where reality is. So that's wrong, but then there's the narrative, moral universe.
You know, reporters as a group were people who, when they did a story on the night that the story was about to be published, they could not sleep because they were afraid they got some little fact in there wrong that was going to ruin their reputations. That was like a commonality for every person in the journalism business. So getting something huge wrong, like this idea that Saddam Hussein has weapons of mass destruction just around the corner. You trust us, it's right over that hill, and you do trust them, and you put it in the news, and it turns out not to be right. Like, that's the kind of thing that you.
Well, maybe the universal history version has Saddam Hussein with WMDs. That's where universal history can. Well, that's the narrative truth. The narrative truth is that Saddam Hussein has WMDs. The factual truth is that no WMDs.
You would not be able to live down if you were just purely a reporter, right? And I think I understand what you're saying, but there's a distinction, and this is what I was talking about, how there's been a drastic change in the way we do business. We are in the narrative business now. We didn't used to be. We were really much more in the business of saying, here's what we know. Like, we call all around, and this is what this person says, and this is what this person says, and this is what the official statements are. Here's the information. We checked it. You do what you want with it. You make your own decisions, and then we'll come back tomorrow and give you what we got.
Because the churches were in the narrative business. Now the parties are. Now everyone's in the narrative business.
Then now it's not really like that. Now we're in what Wesley Lowery calls the moral clarity business, which is we're trying to drive audiences in a direction, and I think we do that more than we used to, much more.
The moral clarity business. Oh, so this objective objective material reality correspondence business. Trying to think of what Alexander Dugin calls it. What an interesting guy. So wrong on some things, but powerful way of words in terms of first class wizard in that way. Now, what did he just call it? Because I got to look it up, because I did look this up before.
Direct. Lowery calls the moral clarity business.
The moral clarity business. Yep, I put it on my blog. It's where I keep things. The moral clarity business. Here we go. Why are some journalists afraid of moral clarity? Well, isn't that exactly what the actors are supposed to give us? Moral clarity? There's an interesting point in the recent Jordan Peterson video. What's so terrible about moral clarity? A future historian of June 2020, a year that historians had joked will spawn narrow chronological specialties, will have answered the question. The phrase has become central to a debate about media and about the possibility of debate itself. The journalist Wesley Lowery, who won the Pulitzer in 2016 for reporting on the systemic nature of police killings of black people, used the phrase in a tweet earlier this month. He was responding to a decision by the New York Times to run an opinion piece by Senator Tom Cotton that advocated the use of military force to quell protests against racism and police brutality. Lowery wrote, Americans view from nowhere, objectivity obsessed, both sides journalism is a failed experiment. We need to fundamentally set the norms of our field. The old way must go. We need to rebuild our industry as one that operates from a place of moral clarity. You're skeptical about the view from nowhere, but you're not skeptical about the moral clarity? The one benefit that modernity had, which was, I can tell you that I'm holding a cell phone with a cell phone stand with a high degree of reliability. It's cold on my face. Moral clarity? Now, how about the morality around this cell phone stand? The mining of the earth, the energy needed, all of the things around the cell phone. Moral clarity? A little bit different, but at least the cell phone I can talk about. Let's speak something for modernity. Big, important point. Something that, now that we get beyond it, you really don't want to lose that. But you also can't lose the wrong in terms of the narrative. You've got to have both of them. They've got to meet. 4 days later, the Times columnist Ben Smith picked up the tweet cementing the oppositional pair. Objective versus moral clarity. The old white male journalist versus the young journalists of color. Tradition versus an unknown news world. The article itself, a reckoning over objectivity led by black journalists. What's the difference in this moment is that the editors of our country's most esteemed outlets no longer hold a monopoly on publishing power. That's right. That's true. So in other words, now that we've lost our monopoly, the correspondence to cell phone stands, if you gotta fake that a little bit, you know, it's narratively true that Saddam has weapons of mass destruction. Let's get him.
Do I really think that I'm so ethical that I can give myself a free hand to do anything? And so I'm increasingly skeptical about large-scale ethical claims of that sort. You know, well, this is so important that. Well, that what exactly? Well, it depends on how important it is. And well, climate change is a good example of that. Well, if it's the ultimate environmental catastrophe everywhere and it's going to happen within 20 years, then, well, we should do everything. Well, okay, let's get detailed about this. Does that mean we get to beat up Andy No if he's not that happy about climate change? Well, he's just one guy, you know? And it's
the moral clarity argument of beating up Andy No.
It's a planet we're talking about here. You know, and that's independent in some...
Someone once said, it's better that one man die and not lose the whole people. Caiaphas? I don't know. We're getting near Lent. It's coming up somewhere.
Sense of whether there are warranted concerns on the environmental front. I know there are. Like the oceans are overfished, for example. That's not a good thing. It's stupid. We should stop doing it. But it's this moral license that goes along with this claim to virtue that really scares the hell out of me. And it's also the fact that you can instantly demonize your enemies, because if you're so virtuous that everything is justified, then anyone who opposes you is virtually Satan themselves.
Yes, I've seen this with my own eyes. This demonization, dehumanization.
So, of course, we start with a joke. And, well, a little joke to them. Our gods are laughing. Our gods are laughing. Oh, if he wins, he loses in that marriage. And then, oh, the other joke. Laugh. Oh, no. It's a joke. It's a joke. Oh, the gods are laughing. Not all the gods are laughing. Up. Here we go. Yeah. He's still kind of smiling. and I'll say something to try and keep my honor. And now, keep my wife out of your mouth. And the gods are watching. It's Grease all over again. Moral clarity. Two kinds of wrong. Hollywood has fallen. What are we going to do? Let me know what you think. Leave a comment.